It's October, so it's time to fulfill my promise I made all the way back in our first review, if you don't count Valhalla Penis Mansion, and do a complete look through of the Hellsing franchise. I know some of you were probably expecting me to do a real horror series, like, I don't know, ghost stories? Don't worry, that's next year. Honestly though, I think this is the best time to cover Hellsing, because while I would love to do it later down the line, we never know when YouTube is going to become stricter with those guidelines, so might as well get one of my more gory picks out of the way. And we're going all out too. First things first, it's time to give this PNG an upgrade. That's right, I am now 3D and not Halloween themed. If you've been following my streams or watching the update videos, you would know I'm a VTuber, and I have been looking for a way to integrate the model into the reviews for a while now, and I've managed to figure it out. It was literally just putting a fucking green screen on the back of my model, so I could just cut it out. I can't believe it took me several months to figure that out. Sure, the model isn't Halloween themed, but that's our goal for next year. Maybe. We'll see. As for the next part of going all out, we're covering everything that is Hellsing related, and I can possibly review. We are doing, in no particular order, the original manga, the prequel, The Dawn, the side story, Crossfire, the 2012 exclusive Hellsing guidebook, the original 2001 anime, the 2006 to 2012 OVA, the animation of The Dawn, and why not Hellsing Abridged for shits and giggles. The only things we're not covering is the prototype mangas, because that's just the origins of Hellsing characters in terms of design. Well, the soundtrack, because I'm not a music critic. And then, the 1996 one-shot, because I can barely find it online, and the live-action movie, because it was announced to be in production last year, and there's no more news about it. Maybe, if they get around to making it, I will review it, but that's it for now. Even after removing those ones, we still have a lot to go through. So let's start with where it all began, the original manga series. So I guess spoilers throughout the whole video, but I'll tell you again when we get to the actual spoilers of each section, if I remember the right end. I guess this is where I put a quick info dump and expectation. So, Hellsing would get its start in Young King Owls in May 1997 and end its publishing run in September 2008. I actually wanted to check out what else was published under this manga, magazine for anything noticeable, and the ones that stood out to me were Trigun and I can never pronounce this properly, Pikigo of Blue Steel. The later I need to read again at some point. I remember having a mild amount of amusement from it, although the plot kind of lost me. Also, the wiki page informed me of this series called Slut Girl, and I will totally be finding that one for later. Anyway, quick synopsis of the story. There's an organization called Hellsing, ran by its current head, Sir Integra Fairbook Wingate's Hellsing, or if we want to use her full title, Miss Honourable Madam Sir Lady Integra Wingate's Winnicasee Van Helsing, who deals with all matters of supernatural on behalf of the British Crown, mainly vampires, though, because this organization has a secret weapon, and that's the original vampire, Alucard. Other key characters are Walter, Integra's butler and veteran vampire slayer, Ceres Victoria, a newly minted vampire and sort of the audience surrogate for this venture, and some French merc I can't remember the name of right now, but his name is on the screen right now. I think it's Pip. It's a stupid name, if it is Pip. But anyway, the key part of the plot starts a few chapters in, where a rival organization called Millennium shows up, and we follow that lead until the end of the series. Those are the churches here, specifically the Catholic Church, and they're pricks, because of course they are. I mean, it's the Catholics, they're the worst branch of Christianity, if you ask me, and I'm saying that as a Catholic. Vampires are hereticals, and they see the Hellsing organization as heretics. That's all you need to really know, because once again, the Catholic Church is pricks. Honestly, a lot of this is just set dressing at the end of the day, because the story is ultimately a vehicle that helps string along the main selling point of the manga, which is the action. How do I put this simply? The action is surprisingly fine these days, and that's a bad thing in this case. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still amazing action set pieces and fight scenes, and I'm sure back in the day, this was amazing by 2008, innate standards, or whatever standards you want to put in that time period I mentioned before. But with the context of his later works, Drifters and Hellsing Ultimate, which is the anime, the original manga doesn't have this one aspect that makes the action pop, and I think it's the art direction's fault. It lacks a distinct style, in my opinion, compared to Hellsing Ultimate and Drifters. Like, Drifters has a far more appealing art style, because once again, it's his later work. You would expect him to at least grow in that aspect. So Hellsing just looks less exciting compared to Drifters, and well, Hellsing Ultimate just has the advantage of animation to just re-amp up those fight scenes and do justice to those, well, pre-mentioned action set pieces. Like, not the shit on the art style, though, because this manga is the reason why I started coming over beautiful one-pages and re-appreciate manga as an art form. It's just, most of it just hasn't aged, I think, well, frankly, once again, compared to its contemporaries. Like, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, it still has some iconic as fuck imagery, such as the scenes of Alucard unlocking his seals, carnage caused by the main bad guys when they finally attack, and of course, the sick posing of the characters for the one-pages. I'm sorry that I'm so hung up on these one-pages, but I love them so much. I want to upscale some of these panels, print them out, and hang them on my wall. It also serves as my rough segue into something I want to talk about: proper use of gore. If you've been with the channel long enough, you may think I have a thing against gore in manga, and I really don't. I just have a thing against the misuse of gore in manga, and how do you misuse it, you may ask? Well, it's a complicated opinion of mine, but to simplify it, I hate it when gore is used as the main focus and not as a complementary set dressing. Okay, I feel like I definitely lost you now with that wordy mess, so let's be simple and use examples. Returning to our good friend DeadTube, a big sticking point I had against it is the fact that it was using shock tactics and disturbing imagery to hide its shallow story and terrible writing. It was using gore as its main focus, and because of that, the gore itself lost impact. It has become meaningless in the manga, and this applies to a lot of mangas like it. It uses gore as a selling point to distract the reader from the fact that it has nothing else going for it. Gore is best used when it's not being shoved in our faces, but as an amplifier, and Hellsing does that brilliantly. It's not parading around like DeadTube, nor is it overly done with the details like with Trash, where you can see the inside of the limbs that's being chopped up and that sort of stuff. It uses a lot of black tone to symbolize the blood being shed in these fights, and while you can argue it's a bit over the top in terms of the amount of blood spilt, I would say it's perfectly fine. It's using a simplified version of gore to sell its violence, and being a bit over-exaggerated with the amount of blood is acceptable in this case. If the gore was over the top, it would ruin the tone of the manga, because this is a supernatural action manga, not snuff porn being labeled under something else. DeadTube and Trash and Prison Lab and, I don't know, Pumpkin Face. I'm putting a bunch of manga on blast now. The point is, I believe gore is like a splash of color in a room. When used in moderation, it's a great set dresser and can really make the main selling point pop out. If it's overused or excessive, it's ultimately detrimental to the overall quality of the product. Anyway, that's my mini rant on the importance of using gore properly. Tune in 5 years from now, where we will use Berserk to talk about how gore and violence can be used as an underlying theme to express something more meaningful. I mean, I say 5 years, but let's be honest, it's going to be next Halloween. I'm bankrupt for ideas for Halloween videos, not gonna lie. Since I'm done furiously masturbating over the art now, let's talk story again. So, since Young Kings was a monthly release, all of Hellsing's chapters were monthly, so despite an impressive run of about 11 years, it was only a 98 chapter read, which isn't a bad thing, mind you. Length should never matter as long as you use that length appropriately to pace your story, and Hellsing does that almost perfectly. Until you watch the anime, but we'll talk about that. I'm jumping the shark, but the beginning is kind of rough, if you ask me, because it spends a lot of time establishing stuff like the rules around vampirism, the importance of the Hellsing organization, some backstory and character building. The first volume is really just the setup volume, and it's really important setup because it introduces the key characters of our story, who's going to be our antagonists, who's going to be our sort of anti-heroes, and set the tone of the story. Volume 2 is where it picks up and introduces us to the real villains through the now huge meme stars, the Valentine brothers, who serve as our intro to Millennium, who are just, well, the Nazis with vampires, who serve as our main villain until the end of the manga. Why I discussed the first 2 volumes at length is beyond me, because my only point here is the fact that its only fault is the fact it spends a whole volume for setup, which was a criticism I throw around a lot. Of course it's necessary, but on revisits, I just skipped to volume 2. So yeah, it's more of a variance criticism. It's not slow, but it just lacks what really makes Hellsing Hellsing, which is the exciting fights. We get a bit of a fight against Anderson, but it's not that fun since Integra gets in the way. So yeah, there's one criticism about the story. Volume 1 is a real sleeper on Eevee. Who would have guessed? So maybe I have a couple more criticisms, but I don't know how to segue into it because we do need to talk about the characters at some point. It was certainly a blast returning to this manga just to witness the original characters again, and it's such a contrast. I have the abridged versions of these characters ingrained into my brain, so I'm just so used to Alucard being a dickhead, Integra being fed up with Alucard, and Drawn just being really into skullfucking. But what surprised me is how close the bridge versions were to the original versions. The only ones that sort of did a 180 in terms of personality is Alucard and Rip Van Winkle, but that would be, it's closer to a 90 degree for Alucard. Like, Alucard really is an asshole in his own rights, just not in the way depicted by Team 4-Star. He doesn't really care for humans, except, unlike his abridged version, he only cares for the orders of his master and does everything Integra demands to the letter. He really is an unfeeling monster who only cares about himself, his kin, and his master. He doesn't really have a storyline in the series because there's nowhere for him to develop. He's a monster that has lived hundreds of years and will continue to live for even longer. He already been fully developed as a character, so all you can do with him is use him as a tool, either to be utilized as a Deus Ex Machina, because he is unkillable, or an attempt to get a point across. Whoops! Looks like I threw shade by accident. I guess we have to return back to discussing the story and how it fails at doing a message about humans being monsters. Also, I guess spoilers for this part. I'm going to keep it brief, but something I notice a lot in early chapters is how they try to put Integra and other characters in this position where they need to make hard calls that makes them question their humanity, and I personally think it doesn't work. I feel like the situation they try to put Integra in doesn't really work. I mean, because Integra is really the main, like, it's the main one having these personal conflicts. For example, in Brazil, where Alucard asks if he can deal with the remaining SWAT force outside who already had their first wave slaughtered by him, he asks his Integra for him to continue. If he's allowed to continue murdering the SWAT members for the sake of getting to the end goal of his mission. Like, how is that a hard call at that point? The fear turkey has already been fucked. There's no point in asking if it's okay to keep fucking the fear turkey, so keep fucking the fear turkey!
That's right, I'm going to fuck the fear turkey.
Okay, I'll stop the bridge references now. But seriously, if it wanted to push the message of humans can be monsters too, it's not done that well. The only other example I can think of this message of humans can be monsters too is with Enrico Maxwell, with the whole fact he starts a fucking crusade while London is burning, and that's a sequence and a half. In fact, it's such a sequence. This next sentence is just going to be a quote from my original 2018 review, because honestly, I don't know how else to put it. So, to quote this sentence. Like when one of the heads of the church watched London burn from the distance on his lounge chair, casually having a nap, who then continues to assemble an army to have a crusade on the heathens who are currently being slaughtered by the Nazis, who are still vampires and maybe also zombies, while electing himself as the new pope, which he then leads the crusade from his Popemobile, which is being airlifted by a helicopter, and is screaming Catholic insults into his mic as his forces mow down everything in their way. Oh yeah, did I mention that everyone in the crusade is dressed up like the KKK? End quote. So, aside from being extremely over the top and silly for no reason when it's been a very straight-laced and supernatural affair, he's also extremely over the top with that example of humans are the real monsters thing. As a fucking Rico, smug arsehole. Going back to characters and the fact there is no real character development, yeah, that's really everyone except Ceres, but her character development is just learning to embrace her identity as a vampire. And everyone else is just set pieces. Like, trying to not spoil anything, but everyone serves a purpose and only exists for that purpose. I mean, Drift is kind of the same, and I didn't really criticize him for that either, but that's probably because I was more distracted and blinded by how fun the characters were. Hellsing doesn't really have that. Well, aside from the Nazis, who has one fun moment where all they're just being up their own little guidebooks for the invasion, that was pretty fucking funny. But everywhere else, it's very heavy in terms of its tone, and the few times it tries to be lighthearted, it only works 2 times for me. One I already mentioned, and the other is when Walter reveals Ceres' new cannon, and that's because the first thing I think of when I see that panel is,
Give that bitch a cannon. Bitches love cannons.
I swear I'm trying my best to not quote Abridged, but it's very hard. Back on topic, Koto Hirano really doesn't know how to develop or do characters. And you can tell from Hellsing and Drifters that that is the case. He's very much an action and aesthetic guy, but it doesn't stop him from giving these characters depth. While I would argue he failed to utilize the story to develop characters, he's very good at fleshing out characters in their backstory to give them depth. You may be thinking DxD isn't fleshing out the characters in their backstories. Well, character development? And, well, not really. For me, character development is a character evolving as the story goes on. Well, in this case, it's just making it easier for us to understand character motives and sympathize with them. So once again, it's giving characters depth, not development. He keeps stroking his ego, though. Well, to keep doing that. We should talk about what he sells at, and we've already talked about how good he is at aesthetics, and we've already discussed how, well, the animation does the action just as better than the source material. So, I guess I don't have much else to add from discussing some story bits, so skip ahead to the timestamp on screen while I talk about some plot criticisms. I say plot criticisms, but really it's set pieces I want to complain about in the second half, aka the Nazis invading London. I mean, it's kind of already mentioned Enrique's Crusade, which was a moment, but, like, the Nazis invading in Zeppelins? In what I'm presuming is late 90s, maybe early 2000s? Sure, they have given in-universe reason for why they managed to get away with invading without being shot out of the sky, but seriously, Zeppelins? You had 50 years to prepare. Why didn't you make a better form of air transport? Surely making artificial vampires and all this other stuff doesn't take you 50 years. Could have made some fucking cargo planes or something. What else we can criticize? Walter's betrayal felt very shoehorned in, although it's not really a betrayal in most cases. It's more like he just wants another chance to fight Alucard. The fact that Alucard took forever to get back to England meant we spent a solid part of the series without the main character, which kind of sucks, but it was necessary due to his purpose as a Deus Ex Machina. I guess that's not the criticism. Alucard is so fucking overpowered. He's so overpowered. He's either holding back in all the time or being restricted by his level system that he has to unlock for certain sequences. Plus, if he was there for the start of the raid, I mean, I guess he wouldn't. We wouldn't have the chaotic fun. There's London collapsing under the Nazi invasion, so I don't know. I guess the small sacrifices they have to make for such an overpowered main character. As I guess by the time we reach the end of what would be considered Act 3, and this is the other criticism, the series has completely gone bonkers, and Alcott is such a raid boss at that point, they have to make a contrived reason for him to lose to Walter and let Ceres finish out the fight with Integra. Yeah, I'm grasping at straws here for criticisms right now, but that really just shows how tight this series Hellsing is. Like, where my only criticisms are either completely subjective or so small it doesn't matter in the bigger picture of things. Or it can be excused by other things. Like, for example, the Zeppelins can be easily excused because it looks cooler. Once again, it's sacrificing story for the sake of improving everything else, and I don't really mind that. Sure, Drifters was able to have a stronger storyline, and characters that are actually people, but I think Hellsing still has the far more iconic visuals compared to Drifters. At the end of the day, the original Hellsing manga holds up incredibly well, despite my criticisms. Like, while in comparison to his later work and his anime, the story is also lacks a little bit. It's still incredibly iconic in its own right, and I would still recommend it to any first timers to the series. For veterans, though, sure, it's good to revisit the classic, but let's be honest, you're better off watching Hellsing Ultimate for your kicks. And if you really want to look at the arc, we got the Hellsing guidebook for that. Yeah, I don't know where else to put this, but this is a thing. Released in 2012 for Japan only, it's not even a proper art book, but rather a normal sized manga that has some character details and 4 panels and art from the original manga. Be careful when getting this, because I nearly paid $66 to get my copy shipped for this video, to get this from a US seller. You are better off finding resellers through Japanese websites and ordering it through a proxy service. It saved me a pretty penny doing that, and if you really want to flip through it without paying for it, there is scans out there. It's just a bit of a pain to find them, which is why I opted to buy my copy. Anyway, original Hellsing manga is 7 out of 10 for still holding up, but still being outdone by its successor and its own anime adaptation. And the Hellsing guidebook? Fucking 4 out of 10. It's not even a real book, and not worth the price it goes for now. If you thought we were done with manga titles, you're wrong! We have 2 titles left before we leave the realm of manga titles. So, we got Crossfire and The Dawn, 2 spin-offs for the sake of expanding the lore of this world. Let's start with Crossfire. It's about 3 chapters long, and is a side story for 2 side characters who really didn't have a presence in the original manga, this being, and I may butcher these names, Heineke Wolf and Yumiko Takagi? I think I pronounced this wrong. What am I supposed to say about 3 chapters worth of content, which amounts to really nothing interesting being added to the lore? It's just, let's throw this guy organization, kill heathens across the world, and that's it. It really offers nothing to the world of Hellsing, and isn't worth tracking down. Yeah, if you're wondering why I'm using the same picture for like the same minute or so, it's because there's barely any scans of it out there. So if you want to read this, I would recommend picking up the Hellsing Deluxe volumes, as volume 3 has all 3 chapters. I haven't picked up my copies yet because pricing on them, but I know I will at some point because this video really is a fucking money pit for me. Now, Hellsing the Dawn is interesting. It only has 6 chapters before being put on indefinite hiatus, and it doesn't appear to be part of the deluxe volume releases, and it has no solo volume release, but it's still to get adapted into animation as part of the Hellsing Ultimate for some reason. I think it's safe to say this is never going to be finished, with Koro Hirano just being focused on Drifters right now. So just like its creator, I don't care either. It's frankly just a thinly veiled excuse to have more young Walter and female Alucard for the fans, and yes, there's some interesting stuff about Millennium in here, but I don't think it's worth the time. If you want to go through this part of the canon, I would recommend doing it while doing a binge watch of Hellsing Ultimate, as, you know, these chapters have been animated. I think as an incomplete story, it really shows lack of effort and focus being put into it. So both this and Crossfire get 3 out of 10. They don't really offer much the average Hellsing fan, and I don't even think diehard fans would enjoy it that much. Now I think we're done with all the printed media, so let's move to Hellsing 2001 and why it deserves more respect. Okay, what I was saying was the segments were off script. So I originally had this whole segment planned to be edited, and then I realized this thing doesn't deserve more effort than it belongs. So I'm gonna pop the video in a second because we're on camera. It's about Hellsing Impure Souls. And it's just a shitty fucking manga adaptation using anime panels. That's all it is. And you'll see in the video in a second. So yeah, I'll just cut to that.
I'm recording this on camera because frankly I was going to give it a whole edited segment. Frankly, it doesn't deserve it. Here it is. This piece of shit. It's terrible. Look at this. It actually looks worse than the actual anime it's stealing its panels from somehow. Just terrible. Terrible. It's actually terrible. And the worst part is, right, I nearly paid $66 to get this shipped in my own country. They're charging this like it's like a collector's item. It isn't. It really isn't. And I think my favorite part is, it's labeled as Volume 1, implying they're gonna have a second volume of this. Well, that never happened, did it? So, we have this whole thing that's advertising itself as Volume 1, and we never go on with it. Why is it called sci-fi? What the fuck? It's called sci-fi on the back. Holy shit. Point is, don't buy this unless you're a collector. Don't try to find it. It's honestly, you're honestly just better off watching anime that we're about to talk about. So I'll just cut back to your normal content now, I guess.
The first of two anime adaptations, Hellsing 2001, was released in October 2001, believe it or not, and ended on a 13-episode run in January 2002. Now, this version of the anime isn't canon, as it was using Volume 1 to 3 as its basis for a different take on the story, but I still consider it a must-watch due to what they did with the source material. I am going to come clean here. I love the original Hellsing anime, and it's because I watched this before I ever read the source material or watched Hellsing Ultimate. With that said, I haven't watched this in nearly a decade as well, so I don't know. Maybe my memory is failing me here. So I'm gonna pop in my DVD set and watch it on the big screen before I finish the rest of this segment. I'll be back. Yeah, this holds up. It's not great, but it really does hold up in its own way. I really do love the different depiction of the source material as well, although I would understand why people may not like it. To sum it up now, this version of Hellsing likes to play it slow despite being shorter than Ultimate, and I think that works quite well for it, for at least what it's trying to do. It has all the charm of an early 2000s anime, and I think that's why I am so forgiving of its flaws. There's a lot to go through, so I guess we could start with the music, because that's quick and easy. To be completely honest again, the only thing I was looking forward to on this revisit, aside from the second and third episodes, was experiencing the intro again. It's such a good OP, and I love the song. It's called World Without Logos, for those who are interested. Apart from that, I love the use of this sort of jazzy music during its more intense scenes, I noticed. Oh, except its action scenes, but like when it's trying to be creepy in that, there's a bit of a smooth jazz vibe to it. Okay, fine, I admit I only want to talk about the intro, but can you blame me? I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, probably, but seriously, I love this intro so much, and it's not just because of the music. The animation just really sells it for me. Like this little transition here, where it's Alucard reaching up, but then it cuts to Integra slamming her desk. This shot of Alucard dual-wielding his signature pistols that smoothly turns into a close-up of said weapon. It oozes coolness and style. If anything, I would just fault the part where it's just Alucard shifting into black features in the middle of the screen while we have side characters popping in and out in the background. It really doesn't add to the vibe, to be honest. Apart from that, I think it perfectly conveys what sort of anime this is, which is a creepy, slow-paced filler of sorts, and, well, that's fine. I think the early episodes are great in its overall atmosphere, and when it does get to its action scenes, and most importantly its original content, it begins to fall apart. It's really at its best when it's trying to expand on what's already there, and really doing justice to Alucard's more horrifying transformations. When it ventures out of that comfort zone, it just loses me, frankly. So by the time we reach like episode 9, where it's going completely original, I really just tune out. Considering it's a 13 episode run, I think only about 5 episodes, 4 of it being mediocre at worst, is alright. I don't really have much else to add here, because I feel like a lot of the substance of this version comes from, yet again, the atmosphere of it. I know I'm mispronouncing that, but shut up. It knows how to be creepy, and it does it well, considering it's a 2001 anime. So, while at the end of the day, it's not the Hellsing people would know or care about, I still like it, flaws and all. I don't care if it's a radically different product to the Hellsing we all know and love. I think it's a perfectly valid interpretation of the source material, and I love it for that. If you never seen it before, I would recommend it just to experience it. It's nowhere near great, nor is it bad, but what it does well is really done well. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. And with the 2001 anime out of the way, we can move on to what I think will be the shortest part of the retrospective if we keep pretending Impure Souls doesn't happen. Well, Hellsing Ultimate. Hellsing Ultimate is a 10 episode OVA series starting in 2006 and ending in 2012. And it was a real labor of love considering over its time it was animated by several different studios. Like the first 4 episodes were done by Satellite, who you may know as the Nanbaka animators. Or Fairy Tail if you want a more famous example, although they only did the first 150 episodes. Episode 5 to 7 was done in-house by Madhouse, who were the Western publishers for the series, and the final 3 episodes were done by Graphinica X Chemadic, weird name, who, as far as I can tell, haven't done anything interesting anime-wise. Oh, except for the fact they made the Tail adaptation of Record of Ragnarok, the piece of shit ruining my new favorite fighting manga, but I can't say mad at them, because they also animated all the cutscenes for Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade Definitive Edition. 2 games in my favorite JRPG franchise, so I guess I'll give them a pass for now. Anyway, I watched this straight after I finished Hellsing 2001, because once again, I own this on physical media, and if you're wondering why there are DVDs and not Blu-rays, it's because I'm a cheap fuck who got these Akashis. Anyway, enough bantering, let's talk about why Hellsing Ultimate made me stop watching anime adaptations of manga I like. From the second you start the first episode, you can tell why this is such a beloved version of the series. Its art direction is more in line with the source material, and it doesn't look dated by later releases, unlike Hellsing 2001. I should stop shitting on Hellsing 2001, it's really not that bad. Back on topic, the art style is really why this series aged incredibly well a decade later, and all because they imitated something close to the original art style instead of making it look generic, like a lot of mainstream anime in my opinion. But by imitating the original art style, it also improves on the manga. Like, Hellsing already in its original form had striking visuals, but Ultimate takes it up a level. Seeing the same amazing visuals and action scenes in not only color but also motion really just takes the cake. Of course, everything else about it is as good as the animation, which means it's great. Minus flaws. I say flaws, but my problems with it are incredibly minor and an otherwise perfect adaptation of the series. So let's start by talking about the minor of problems, which is the CGI looks so fucking dated. When it shows up, that is. The show is very much primarily 2D and hand-drawn, which does mean it ages incredibly well. But the few times it does use CGI for certain animations, well, it's completely jarring and ugly. I'm already a huge hater of CGI because, being used in most anime shows, because while I do understand it's cheaper and faster for studios to use CGI over traditional animation, I just don't think it ages well. And it never looks good on a studio budget. Of course, the CGI usage in the series is limited, like I said, but considering how bad it is, and how very minor the use of the CGI is to begin with, I just wonder why did they not just animate it normally. Like, for example, in the Brazil section of the story with the SWAT guys, I wonder why they had the CGI the guns forcing the elevator doors open. Like, everything else around it, about the scene, is animated. So why go for the effort of CGI in the guns when you could have just drawn them in as well? I'm sure the actual animators have their reasons, but to someone like me, the average watcher with no knowledge of animation techniques, it just doesn't make sense. I guess if you want the biggest offender of this, watch episode 8. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. My only other problem is the pacing of the story, surprisingly. I don't know why, but the story here feels very rushed, despite being almost exact copy of the story of the manga. The only noticeable differences is the fact they shuffled around some backstory flashbacks for series, and the chapter of Integra meeting Alucard for the first time is being spliced in between the first episode, which aren't criticisms. I personally love the fact they did that, because it becomes less of an info dump when it comes to those scenes, and it fits perfectly well. I just think with the fact each episode is covering an entire volume of the manga, you start to notice how rushed the plot is. Even with each episode being expanded by 40 to 60 minutes long, and no story beats being cut out, it still feels not well paced, but I think that's really just an innate problem with the source material that the anime happened to uncover. But I guess when you're reading, it's not really noticeable when you're reading it, only when you're watching it, which is weird to say, but that's my point, really. To get to my main point that I haven't addressed yet, so we can close out this segment, this is why I don't watch a lot of anime adaptations of manga anymore. To me, a lot of studios just don't put the same amount of effort as Hellsing Ultimate when adapting some scene from the source material. Sure, just animating it should be the end goal of it, but directly translating from the source material doesn't feel like utilizing the chance given to them to elevate the product and bring it closer to perfection. And Hellsing does that. If I wasn't fucking illiterate and born with a handicap, I would probably spend the next 10 minutes fighting why I feel like is such as the case. But unfortunately, I am both illiterate and artistic. Wait, that's supposed to say autistic. So my backup plan is just to tell you to watch Hellsing Ultimate, which I'm giving a 9 out of 10. The stuff I have problems with are ultimately incredibly minor, and I still think there's value in going out of your way to watch this, especially on a big screen in 1080p at least. It's still a visual masterpiece, which truly does justice for the source material, and who knows, you might understand what I was trying to convey. Reasons to not watch anime anymore. And while you order that Hellsing Ultimate Blu-ray from our future corporate overlords Amazon at actually a reasonable price, I'm going to talk about Hellsing Ultimate Abridged. Yes, I am skipping Hellsing the Dawn anime. because it's an animated Hellsing the Dawn. It's an automatic 4 out of 10, as the higher quality animation just improves it enough to justify giving it an extra points. Now, Hellsing Abridged. It's a YouTube anime parody series by Team 4-Star, well known for their Dragon Ball Z Abridged series. And if you've seen Hellsing, you've most likely seen Hellsing Ultimate Abridged. Now, for those who have been living under a rock, an abridged series is pretty much someone taking like a movie or a show, recutting the show, and redubbing the lines to make it into a comedy series. It's kind of a stable of early YouTube, like 2009, 2010, although there aren't many good ones in my opinion these days. Hellsing Abridged is honestly one of the better ones, but I don't think it's aged well humorized. Now, since this is effectively a rewriting of the original OVA series, the only thing I can talk about is the writing, and I do like it. They take the characters and just extend their character traits to their logical extremes for the sake of humor. Integra is constantly sick of everyone's shit, says he hates being called police girl all the time, Pip is aggressively French, Dwan is always talking about his penis, and most importantly, Alucard, absolute distaste for humans and disinterest in everything, has been turned into him being the world's funniest arsehole. This is Alucard. This Alucard is just so fucking quotable, it's actually not funny. To rapid fire my favourite quotes, there is...
Get that bitch a cannon. Bitches love cannon.
My name is Luke Valentine.
And I'm Carmen Sandiego. Guess where I am?
You know, they say that TV makes you violent. But I say not having my TV is making me pretty fucking violent.
Hey kids, want to see a dead body?
Dear Chief
Replacement. I wanted to send you this friendly little letter to inform you of your imminent demise. If you're curious about the frequency of which I've sent these letters, it is merely to instill as much fear as I can, as if basting a turkey, which I will then proceed to have sex with. That's right, I'm going to fuck the fear turkey. Follow me on Twitter at @TheCrimsonFucker. So I was just chillaxing in my room like a baller, and then all of a sudden these schmucks kicked in my door. One of them yelled out,
Get on your knees!
And I responded with, I'm not your mother last night! And they took exception to that. Ah, the return of the Y-boner. With a vengeance. Was that boy-girl bugging you?
And like that, the war begins!
Whoops, did I just accidentally war?
That's just a select few, because there's so many. This Alucard and some of the other characters just replace the originals in my mind. The Major lives rent-free in my mind, frankly. I just can't read any of his lines without that German accent of his.
Gentlemen, we are Nazis.
Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!
Und we will have war.
Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!
Und we
Gesundheit! Gesundheit!
It's not only has great character humor that lands well, there's also great story-based gags as well, like how they spend the first 3 episodes with Integra in denial that the enemy is the Nazis, Alucard's entry into the meeting with the Queen, and everything that went between them, Alucard vandalizing the Jesus statue, and the whole scene with Maxwell and his Crusaders secretly being KKK members. Because, please note that there's a lot of things I'm complimenting here are found in the early episodes, because frankly, it peaks in those early episodes, and loses a lot of its charm later on. Like, the only joke I liked from the later episodes is that Maxwell Crusaders joke. For every brilliant Alucard joke, there's an equally terrible joke that counteracts it, and I can pinpoint the second it stops being funny. It's when Van Winkle comes in, and they try to cast her as a typical Tumblr user, complete with dated memes. It's not funny, nor is it smart, it's just there, wasting a good portion of the episode's runtime. It kind of just becomes grating. I think it's made worse, because when I was younger, I thought this was the peak of comedy. So I'm just shitting on my own nostalgia right now. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still one of the best Abridged series available, which honestly just means the rest of the Abridged series out there are terrible, and I'm not retracting that statement. If you've seen Hellsing Ultimate, I think it's worth checking this out, because it is funnier with the original context of the show in mind for some of these scenes. I just don't think it has any rewatch value. It's a once-and-done experience in my opinion, so for what it's worth, 5 out of 10. Now let's end this with a party.
Party, 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 I wanna have
So that was a trip, a very expensive and time-consuming trip, which I will never see the return of investment in my case, but a trip nevertheless. I guess to end this on my closing thoughts, Hellsing is still a very well done series, even by today's standards. It has aged extremely gracefully, although my same criticisms I had before when I was younger are still there. I will never forget how bonkers that actually turns out. But there is something that's been bothering me, and that's something I said in my old review of Hellsing back in 2018, where I kept comparing it to Drifters and calling it a Drifters prototype. I mean, we did spend the whole manga part of this review comparing it to Drifters, but I also went through everything else we reviewed for this video with that phrase in mind, and I can't say I was wrong to think that, but I won't say I was right either. I do think Drifters ups Hellsing in the visuals and story department, especially because Drifters is soaking in a lot of hidden deeper meanings and symbolism, blah blah blah. If you want to hear me rant about that nonsense, go watch the Drifters review. What I don't think Drifters have on Hellsing is everything else. I think Hellsing has a stronger main cast of characters, despite not being as fun though. You know, it also has the better action set pieces, and most importantly, it has the most fun. Drifters is fun, but it's fun for a different reason. Drifters fun comes from watching well-known historical figures bouncing off each other, which isn't for everyone. Hellsing's fun is deprived from extremely over-the-top action sequences, which I think has a much broader appeal. You don't need to know your history to understand why Alucard activating Restriction Level 0 has a great sense of catharsis. So, while it's correct to call Drifters the better series than Hellsing, because it's the standard for future series by the same creator to always be improving, Hellsing still has stronger aspects than Drifters, so it isn't a prototype. Well, the question is solved, so let's actually wrap up now. To remind you of my scores for everything we talked about, or just to make sure you people who skipped to the end understand how I feel about everything we talked about, here's the rapid fire of my scores. Original Hellsing manga, 7 out of 10. The official Hellsing guidebook, 4 out of 10. Hellsing The Dawn and Crossfire, 3 out of 10. Hellsing Impure Souls, 2 out of 10. Hellsing the 2001 anime, 6 out of 10. Hellsing Ultimate, 9 out of 10. Hellsing The Dawn animated, 4 out of 10. And finally, Hellsing Ultimate Abridged, 5 out of 10, although it borders a 6 out of 10. So, it seems like the original source material will remain strong, while everything else that spins off or deviates from the path just doesn't have the same magic as the original. The only standout recommendations I have is the original manga, Hellsing Ultimate, and Hellsing 2001, despite its average score. I still think it's worth watching for the alternative take of the series. Hellsing Abridged could also get a recommendation, but that deeply depends on your own sense of humor. Anyway, stop watching this video and go enjoy your Halloween now. And when you're done doing your treats or tricking, go watch Hellsing. It's still a classic that wholeheartedly deserves your attention. I'm gonna sit here now and start prep for the next year's Halloween special. I really have nothing else to do. Happy Halloween.